Hello, my name is Casey Rasmussen, and I'm the Director of Student Support Services and Facilities at Aveson School of Leaders.
My name is Diane Simonson. I'm the Director of Personalized Mastery Learning at Aveson School of Leaders.
Today's recording, we are going to share with you tips for distance learning success. We are going to share tips for social emotional learning. We'll share tips for literacy, spelling, reading, and writing, and then we'll also share tips for math in distance learning. We are going to share a slideshow with you that will walk you through all of these topics. So we are starting with social and emotional learning because we believe at Aveson that SEL is the foundation. And without SEL, the ability to recognize your feelings, the ability to name your feelings, the ability to regulate when you're having big feelings, the ability to problem solve, to ask for help. Without these skills, it is very difficult to access the academic content. So what we want to be able to share with you and to impress upon all of our families is that first and foremost, it's all about SEL. The rest will come. So when things are feeling hard, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I want you to breathe and remember, what am I doing right now to care for myself as the guardian, as the parent, and then what can I do to support my child's SEL? So first and foremost, some things I would like you to think about are what are the things that I am currently doing to build trust, connection, and safety for my child. Trust is really important. And now you might think I have an excellent trusting relationship with my child, right? But now we are tasking all families with being your child's at-home educator. And when you are now entering into a new role, that's different than being a regular parent, you might need to develop a trust relationship with your child in a different way. So how can I make it safe for my child to make mistakes, to grow, to thrive, to celebrate my accomplishments? And when you're able to kind of renegotiate and reestablish what it means to have a trusting relationship now as your child's home educator in conjunction with your child's advisor, you can start to build that connection with your child, and connection is incredibly important. And through trust and through connection comes safety, right? Your child's sense of, I can be who I am as a learner, as your kiddo in our home environment. So regular check-ins. I encourage you to consider if you are having regular check-ins with your kiddo. How are you doing today? How did that feel for you? Was that hard? Was that easy? How can I help? What's working? What's not working? Do we need to ask for help from your advisor? So regularly being able to check in, get a sense of how your kiddo is doing. Connection time. I encourage you to consider having time that is all about eye contact, touch in a playful situation. And I also want you to think about connection time, not so much as quantity of connection time, but quality of connection time. A 5-minute one-on-one undivided attention connective time with your child can be so much more powerful than thinking about like, oh man, I have to spend hours playing board games with my child, and then I have to spend hours doing homework with them, and now I have to go outside and run and play with them. 5 minutes a day where you put aside your devices and really do something silly and fun and playful with your child can go really far in supporting your child's SEL. The power of play. It is so vital that our kiddos are playing, and that means our TKers all the way through our 5th graders. Your kiddos need to engage in creative play, whether that being building Legos, playing with Play-Doh, playing a board game, playing with siblings if they have siblings, connecting with peers if you're online or outside if you're able to do that. The power of play. So kids are actually doing really important, valuable work when they are playing. They are learning to problem solve. They are learning to communicate. They are learning to know their own boundaries. So please do not underestimate the time that your child needs to spend playing. And with that comes the power of being outside. When we can get outside and get fresh air, that can rejuvenate us and help us to help support our SEL growth. So getting outside as much as you can. That also comes with the power of exercise. You know, we are sitting now more than ever. I cannot tell you how much time I spend sitting on my device, which is a world was very new to me compared to how active I usually am when we are on campus. And being able to exercise, get that blood flowing, keeps your upper centers of your brain open, helps your child to regulate. So I encourage you to consider how much time can you spend encouraging your child to get some exercise. The power of healthful food. We know what it's like to have to tackle the world on an empty stomach, or a stomach that maybe isn't filled with a balance of foods, right? The same goes for your kiddo. How can you encourage your kiddo to be mindful of their food choices and to have balance so that they are more able to tackle their distance learning expectations? The power of mindfulness. We practice core practice. We practice using the Mind Up curriculum at Aveson. And the point of that is to start recognizing our bodies, how they're connected to our minds, and how all of that is connected to our feelings, and then how we respond to those big feelings. So can we take some deep breaths during the day? Can we encourage our kiddos to start noticing, where am I feeling that uncomfortable feeling in my body, and what does that mean? How can I help myself through that? And then balanced screen time. We are on screens more now than ever. And I highly encourage families to consider what a reasonable balance would look like for your family when you're trying to think about playing and being outdoors and getting exercise, and how much time your kiddos are on Zoom and interacting with their learning platforms. How can you have a balance that incorporates these other pieces that overall will support your child's SEL? Now, that's the foundation, SEL. And I'm going to paint a best case scenario for you. So supporting social emotional learning really starts with routines and rituals. Kiddos in elementary thrive on routines and rituals. And yes, even our 11-year-olds in 5th grade, all the way down to our 4-year-olds in TK. Routines and rituals are vital, and now even more so, right? Because our whole world was flipped upside down. And while we have been going through distance learning and through COVID for many months now, it is still a very uncertain and unpredictable time. And that can contribute to feelings of stress, to feelings of anxiety. And with kiddos, we want to be able to kind of bring that in for them. And one way to do that is by providing routines and rituals where we can. So I would like you to consider a daily schedule, and I have visual there in capitals. So our kiddos at this age, you know, through 3rd, 4th grade, sometimes 5th grade, they paint pictures in their minds. And so it's a visual representation of kind of navigating their world. And a visual schedule will help with that. Pictures are great. Icons are great. It does not have to be fancy. It does not have to be complicated. Something so that your child can see, oh, this is what I do first. This is what I do next. Oh, I'm going to finish up doing this, and then great, my day is done. I'd love for you to consider a designated learning space. And this goes with, again, routines and rituals, because when your child knows where to go to get on my screen, on my device for my Zoom, they know where to find their learning materials, their math workbook, their math whiteboard. It allows for them to be self-initiate, and it allows them to be independent and to take control where they can of their learning time and of their learning space. So I I encourage you to consider having that designated space. I encourage you, please, to consider brain breaks. So as we know, sitting for a long time you can have diminishing returns, right? No matter how engaging your awesome advisor is, and all of our advisors are, kiddos need brain breaks between the different Zoom sessions, between the different Seesaw or Google Classroom activities. So that could be as simple as, let's stand up, let's do 3 jumping jacks, let's stand up and take 3 big belly breaths in, let's go outside and walk around the backyard, the front yard, around the block. Whatever it is to kind of break from sitting in front of the screen or sitting in front of the schoolwork to re-engage the brain and get us back to focus. I also encourage you to have routines and rituals around celebrations and gratitude. So as much as things can feel hard, as much as things can feel uncertain, and there are going to be days where Seesaw and Google Classroom are the worst things on the planet, there are going to be days where it's actually pretty okay and sometimes even great. Your child maybe persevered through a particularly tough assignment and they feel proud. Celebrate that, honor that, and then find ways to be grateful for the things that you do have, the things that are going well. Again, it's a mind shift that helps your student, empowers them to take ownership of their own SEL. I have some questions here to consider also, which align with routines and rituals. I'm going to read them quickly. Does my child know when, where, and how learning will take place each day? Does my child know where to access their learning supplies and how to organize them? And then things for you as the parent, right? Consider, what are my non-negotiables? Is it a non-negotiable that, advisory, we got to sit at the table, but for, science, we can be messy on the table and we don't need to sit at the designated desk? Is it a non-negotiable that, all of our classwork time is indoors? Or maybe where can you be flexible with that? Yeah, I'm okay if my kid does their Seesaw activity outside, for example. And do you have clear expectations? Have you established them with your kiddo, and are they consistently followed? All of these things aid in establishing a ritual and a routine that your child can come to expect, and your child can come to own, so that, again, they can self-initiate and take ownership of their time engaged with distance learning. Supporting social emotional learning and self-regulation. So this is when times get tough. And notice I said when, not if, because we are all human, your kiddos are human, and we are going to have big feelings. You as adults are going to have big feelings about distance learning. Your children are going to have big feelings about distance learning. So it's not a matter of if, it is when. And feelings, I really want to emphasize, all feelings are okay. Anger is okay. Happiness is okay. Boredom is okay. All feelings are okay. It's a matter of, can we name them? And what are we going to do with them to keep us moving forward in a positive and healthy direction? The first thing I would love for you to consider doing when times get tough is breathe. And then I want you to keep breathing, and I want you to keep breathing some more. Sometimes kiddos are not going to want to breathe with you, and that's okay. You can breathe for them, and that's absolutely okay, because what you are modeling for them is, I recognize this is tough right now, and guess what? We're going to handle it together. I've got you. I'm here with you. Okay? Recognize it, name it to tame it. This is a phrase that we've said before at Aveson. Advisors use this phrase. And what this is doing is helping your children recognizing that something doesn't feel right. Where is it in your body? Do you feel it in your tummy? Is your head hurting? Maybe you're shaking a little bit. How is your heart? Is it racing? Okay, recognize something isn't feeling quite right now. I wonder if we can put a name to it. Oh, I'm feeling really mad because I can't figure out how to put a text box in my Google slide. I'm feeling really nervous because my teacher wants me to participate and I don't know what to say when she calls on me, right? So can we help our kiddos name their feelings? Because once you're able to name it and recognize it, it's not so scary anymore. And when it's not so scary, we can start to work with that big feeling to be able to actively calm ourselves so that, again, we can get back to it, right? So that comes to the next bullet there is safe place. Does your child have a place somewhere in the home, somewhere maybe outside in the backyard or the front yard, where they can actively calm if they need to? So I am, I feel, and I choose. We want to help kiddos move through this process of regulation. Oftentimes when kids have a big feeling, they will start with, I am angry. Well, feelings are not who we are. It's something we have, it's something we experience, but I am not anger. I am not sad. I am not happy. It's something that I'm feeling. So we want to move from I am that thing to I feel it, right? I feel really angry right now. And it goes back to naming it to tame it. So I recognized it. I can name it. Now, what do I do with it, right? So I choose to. Can I breathe it out? And we have some breaths that we actively work on at school. There are lots of other ways to breathe it out. I choose to take a lap around the yard because maybe I need to like motor it out, right? Maybe my anger is so much. This assignment is so frustrating. I need to motor it out. Breathing is not going to be enough for me, right? I choose to ask for help. I choose to ask for a hug from my trusted adult. I choose to drink some water. A lot of times we are dehydrated and we don't even realize it, and that's aiding to our big feeling, right? And not being able to handle it well. Okay, so lots of different ways in which your child can actively calm, and it'll be really important for you and your kiddo to decide what works best, or maybe what works best in that moment, because what worked right now may not work tomorrow. But it's that collaborative process with your kiddo to help them find a way to own it, to manage it, right? So that it's okay, and you don't have to be scared of your big feeling, and you can calm down. So questions to consider. Does my child know where to go to calm? Do you have a place in your home? Does my child know how to calm? So it's not as easy as saying, go calm down in your safe place, okay? If your kiddo doesn't know how to choose the appropriate things to actively calm. Do I need to be a co-regulator? So in those cases, you might need to be the person who is breathing with your child, who is offering just, I'm gonna sit with you because you're not alone in this, right? I'm not gonna abandon you in your moment of crisis, in your moment of big feelings. I see you, and it's okay you're having these big feelings. I'm gonna keep you safe until we can get through this. Do you need to co-regulate with your child? Does your child know how to bounce back? Right? This is something that we take for granted. We think, oh, once we're calm, we can get right back to it, right? Sometimes it's embarrassing to have a big feeling. Sometimes we say and do things, right, that we might be feeling embarrassed about or regret later. And so bouncing back from that can feel hard because maybe there needs to be some repair work. Maybe I need to apologize. Maybe I need to fix something I didn't mean to break, right? So does your child know how to bounce back? And do you need to support them in being able to bounce back, right? Because that's the goal. The goal is to not to sit with that big feeling and that big anger and maybe those subsequent feelings of, you know, I didn't like how I behaved during my big feelings. It's being able to move past that and know, yeah, big feelings come and go. How can we move on? And again, the same things to ask yourself. What are my non-negotiables? Where can I be flexible? And are my expectations established, clear, and consistently followed? Sometimes there's going to be days when you need to, and this is going to speak to my next slide, is you need to abort mission. And that is absolutely okay. So when times get even tougher, when the big feelings are just too much, the schedule is too much, there is just too much work today, for whatever reason. Maybe you are also working full-time and you were slammed with back-to-back meetings and you just weren't able to support your kiddo the way you were hoping to. Maybe your kiddo's just not feeling it that day, and every assignment on Seesaw and Google Classroom or every Zoom was frustrating. It's okay to recognize, like, you know what? We're gonna put that aside for today. And that is absolutely okay. At no time, really, at no time do we want any family or any student to feel like they have to slog through their distance learning platforms and Zoom classes because, you know, we said, be here at this time and do this assignment and get it turned in. If it is not working for you, it is okay to abort mission for that time period until you can get back on track. We need to be able to collaborate with families, and we need to be able to work with you so that it makes sense for you and for your kiddo. And it's okay to ask for help. We are here for you. Your advisor is there for you, and we want to collaborate with you. So please, please, please reach out to your advisor, reach out to Diane or myself so that we can support you in getting yourselves back on track for what makes sense for you. And I want to conclude my tips here on supporting social emotional learning with some resources. The first two are our school-wide curriculum that we use to support social emotional learning, Conscious Discipline. And I highly recommend taking some time to peruse Conscious Discipline. They actually not only support educators, but a big part of what they do is supporting parents. And so they actually have a tremendous library of resources for supporting parents with kiddos SEL, and have shifted, of course, to support parents in distance learning. So there's some great podcasts and some great videos, and also all sorts of other things for parents to access. The other resource, if you want to just learn more about Mind Up and how we use it in schools and how you might be able to use it at home, that resource is there. And then I like to remind parents about CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which is where we draw a lot of our understanding about SEL in the school setting. And they are a wealth of information. So that is another resource that you can turn to. Alrighty, I'm going to conclude our SEL portion here, and I'm going to turn over the next part to Diane.
Thanks, Casey. Well, a bridge in terms of personalized mastery learning at Aveson, what we've always said is the foundation is really the relationship between student and advisors, and in this case, when parents are supporting the relationship. So in terms of that SEL being the foundation of everything we do is why we had Casey speak first, because it really underpins everything. I wanted to say that before I start sharing specific strategies in supporting students in literacy or in reading or writing or in math, is I want to really recognize that different families are in different places and have different constraints on their time. And so the suggestions that I'm making today, or the ideas for support, are really just that. They're really just suggestions for your family. And depending on your family's particular situation and stage in terms of work schedules and number of children that you're caring for at the same time, and different family stresses and circumstances, many parents I've talked to already feel pretty maxed out. And so don't look at these strategies as additional things to do, but instead things that could help the time that you do help your children with their schoolwork to be more successful. So I wanted to just start with that. So my background is I'm a reading specialist. I have a K-12 reading specialist credential, and literacy is my passion. I want to start by talking about developing lifelong readers, because when we talk about distance learning, in terms of reading, what we really want is students to have critical literacy skills into adulthood and post-secondary education, and to have a reading life. So in terms of supporting literacy, the best thing you can do is to read to your child daily. So when you're trying to prioritize and figure out how you're going to use your time to support your child, I would really ask for that to be your number one priority, is reading to your child daily. It's really ideal if this can be like a bedtime routine, because for the next point, the other thing is having your child read to you or to read independently daily. I want to point out that that should really happen earlier in the day. So if you're reading with your child or supporting them in their reading, or they're reading independently, ideally that's not right before bedtime when they're tired and frustrated. So if your routine is that you read to your child late in the day or in the evening or before bed, but have your child read to you, or have a daily independent reading time that's at another time in the day, again, goes back to that routine and rhythm and ritual. The next thing I would say is to just model your own reading life in terms of to show your kids of when you're reading for work. Oh, I'm reading an article for work right now, or reading for pleasure, or reading about your favorite sport, but to talk about reading and how reading is part of your life, either in a professional setting or home setting, but to just model that as adults. I want to spend a little bit of time about book choice. I feel like this is so critical in terms of reading development. Spend some time on it. In terms of helping your children have books that they want to read, and helping them to match to those, that there's some challenges in distance learning, but there's also some real opportunities in terms of resources that are out there. You've probably heard the expression that books should be both mirrors and windows. And what that means is, you ideally, in terms of diversity in books, that you want to have text that both mirrors your child and your family, and books that are more like windows. So in terms of diversity, that is reflective of your child and your family, and of other families. I can speak some to this in terms of, as a parent of a child. I have a child by birth, a child that looks more like me, and then a child by adoption, and raising a child of color. And in terms of the importance of having diverse books and also diverse toys, and in our home has always been a priority. But not only does that benefit my daughter, who is Latina, but also my son, who is white, in terms of making sure that that he sees all of those different models of diversity in reading, in toys, in play. It's always been a priority in our family. Also, when you don't see books, or enough books, that represent your family, is the idea of creating your own. So it's pretty simple to take some pictures from your iPhone and put them into a slideshow, and have your child help add some text to that. And that can even be their own readable text. And then you instantly have a book that's truly representative of the uniqueness of your family. And that's something that I did with my kids to represent our family, and to make sure that representation is there. And then in addition to a diversity lens and mirror and windows, you really want to woo your children with books. You want to find their passion. You want to find out what they really want to be reading about, and help them to match to books that they just love. And that sometimes it takes the help of somebody else. For example, if you call Romans and ask to talk to the children's department to ask for ideas, oh, if my child likes this book, what else might you recommend? Or looking on the library websites, or asking your child's advisor. If your child says to you, oh, parent, there's nothing I want to read, then ask to, reach out to the literacy advisor and say, oh, do you have some suggestions? Sometimes just hearing suggestions from other people helps a child to get unstuck. But as much as possible, if it's books that are available for free online or via the public library, it really, having your child read books that they want to be reading is super critical in terms of developing a reading life. Next, ideally, your child would be reading both fiction and informational reading. And again, in school, this is automatically going to be, part of their experience in school. There'll be informational reading, but ideally, in terms of independent reading, it's wonderful if you can have a mix of both. Some kids love informational reading, and that's all they want to read, and some kids love fiction, and that's all they want to read. And so, you don't want to turn it into a battle, but if you can introduce a different book, that would be great. My daughter in kindergarten, her favorite book was called What Does This Arachnid Do? And it was a book with repetitive text where the left page would always say, what does this arachnid do? And then it would talk about that arachnid. And we read that book probably every day for almost all of kindergarten. So in terms of having, exposure and access to, fiction and informational reading. Lastly, I want to talk about knowing reading benchmarks, but avoiding comparison. Something we talk about when we're in the classroom often is like that we're each climbing a reading staircase, that children are learning how to read and they're climbing a reading staircase and they're able to take on more challenging texts over time. And as they do that, in the classroom, we always say you never criticize another child about where they are on the staircase. And what I would say is for the child themselves to really honor where they are in their reading development and to really let your child know, like, you're growing as a reader. And right now you can read this book, but soon you'll be able to read that book. And that's part of the beauty of reading aloud to your kids, is what you're reading aloud to them is often what they can't yet access on their own, but it gives them sort of a preview of what's to come as they continue to grow as a reader. So I would say that to honor where your child is in their reading development, encourage them, to continue growing, but avoid comparison. So sometimes, for example, a first grader will see another first grader reading very thick chapter books. Or a parent will see a cousin that is, reading Harry Potter as a second grader. And oh, why isn't my child doing that? So what I would say is that occasionally there's a child that's further ahead if they're reading development at a young age, but oftentimes by 5th or 6th grade, those differences are kind of a wash. And so I just want to encourage you not to land in comparison, but to know ideally, kindergartners would be reading simple sentences by the end of kindergarten with high frequency words and what we call CVC words, which are words like bus, cat, consonant, vowel, consonant. That's ideal at the end of kindergarten to read sight words and CVC words in simple sentences. By the end of first grade, very early chapter books like Frog and Toad, for example. Ideally, first graders would read Frog and Toad independently by the end of first grade. By the end of second grade, that students would be reading slightly longer and more complex chapter books and series. And it goes on from there. So no reading benchmarks. Be aware if your child's not hitting those benchmarks to communicate regularly with your child's literacy teacher. However, to avoid comparison in terms of if your first grader is reading Frog and Toad and another first grader is reading a much more challenging text, that is just fine. By 6th grade, they might be reading the exact same text, and ideally by college, they'll all be accessing college level texts. All right, now I'm going to move on to supporting writing and spelling. The first thing I want to say is that writing really is a process, and that pre-writing is an important part of that process. So if your child is sitting down to write a narrative or to write a response for distance learning, the pre-writing can take a lot of different forms. Oftentimes a conversation separate from writing entirely is the best kind of pre-writing. To just say, oh, well, let's just talk about it first. If you speak a second language to your child frequently at home, sometimes to start in the home language and then shift the conversation to how they might say that in English is another strategy. So that's called oral rehearsal, especially for little ones. Kindergartners, sometimes they can't remember their sentence by the time they're writing it down. So if you have them tell you the sentence and then repeat it, and then you repeat it back to them, that's called oral rehearsal and practice. And by the time they're ready to do the work of writing, they'll remember what they wanted to say. Another form of pre-writing is drawing. So if your child enjoys drawing, to allow them to take time to draw, to get their ideas down in pictures first. They can even create like a picture story map to map out their story and ideas. So pre-writing can take a lot of forms, but it's really, really critical for kids that they have a period of time of gathering their ideas. When students are drafting, they take those ideas and they get their ideas down on paper. And the focus of drafting should really be on the content of the story rather than the mechanics. So as you want to foster independence in writing, your child's writing away, and they're using non-standard spelling, I would allow that fluency and allow that drafting to keep going. And then when you're ready to edit with them, to pick a few conventions to explore together, but to not interrupt their drafting and their fluent writing, allow them to get those ideas on paper. That leads me a little bit to talk about spelling, that when you provide spelling support, the focus ideally would be on tools and developmental patterns more than spelling everything correctly. So for example, different high frequency word lists for kindergartners, it might just be a few words, like the first few words of high frequency words. And then as kids get to know those words, then a bigger list of high frequency words and so on. And in terms of patterns, you want to, if kids are just learning their short vowel words, then you can help them to see the patterns in short vowel words like cat and hat and mat. Oh, if you can spell mat, then you can spell cat. If you can spell, and then if your child is just learning the silent E, oh look, yes, that word needs a silent E. So you're focusing on your support is more about helping your children with tools, the developmental patterns for what they're working on in spelling, rather than something that's far beyond what they're working on in spelling. Additionally, you can give your child a little word bank. So if they do that pre-writing and in that pre-writing they're telling you the story, you can take some of those key words and write them on the corner of the paper and create like a little word bank. So then when they're writing their sentences, they can refer back to that word bank. Again, it's a tool, but you want to foster independence. And so the idea of kids drafting without interruption, having spelling tools, you want to foster independence. If your child says, how do I spell? Ideally, you would want to point them to a tool, a pattern, or ask them to say the word slowly and ask them, what do you hear? So rather than just you stretching the word for them and you making the sounds for them, then you would ask them to do the same. So if they say, how do you spell park? And you say it, say park. What do you hear? Park. You say it. If your child cannot yet segment those sounds, model it for them, but then ask them to do it again. Everything you want to do with writing, you want to think about the goal of independence in the long haul rather than creating dependence in your child. And it will go a long way. And viewing writing as a process allows you to do that because you can have that pre-writing conversation. You can allow your child to draft as independently as possible. You can go back and support spelling using a tool or what's developmentally appropriate for your child. And then they can build stamina and foster independence. You can foster independence. Ideally, at the end of kindergarten, students would write 2 or 3 sentences on their own. By the end of first grade, they would write 2 or 3 sentences across 2 or 3 pages. And then by second grade, they would be writing 3 or 4 sentences onto 3 or more pages. And then in third grade, that's where they start to learn about paragraphs. So in third grade, they start to learn about paragraphs. Fourth grade, they sort of understand and start to master paragraphs. And by 5th grade, really seeing those multi-paragraph essays develop and on into middle school. So again, know your benchmarks, but keep that in perspective and foster independence when helping your child in writing. All right, next I'm going to talk a little bit about supporting math instruction. And I would say that the greatest thing that you can do to support your child is to model a growth mindset around math. What do we mean by a growth mindset? Well, if you have the unfortunate experience of feeling like math was difficult for you as a child, or if you're feeling like you didn't grow up feeling, quote, good at math, to make sure to instead for your kids to model that they can learn that math concept. So rather than the idea of they're not good at math or you're not good at math, instead to say, oh, decimals, okay, you haven't mastered that concept yet. We're going to work on it together. Oh, adding 2-digit numbers, I can see that that's challenging. Well, I'm going to support you and help you. You haven't mastered that yet, but you will. So that's what a growth mindset, the most powerful word is yet. So as you're helping your child in math, yeah, you haven't gotten this yet. Let's work at it together. Let's rewatch the Eureka video together. Let's use some concrete objects and do it together. So that's a growth mindset. It's not about being good at math or bad at math. It's about what are you learning now? What you will be learning in the future. Eureka has excellent parent tip sheets in English and in Spanish. They're really excellent for every single module, and they're great ideas for how to help your child. And then additionally, as I've said before, as much as possible, if a math concept is feeling difficult, try to take it to real life objects and drawings when possible. Take it out of the abstract and gather real objects from around the house, or to draw a picture, help your child to see it as much as possible. And then I want to talk a little bit specifically about the Eureka problem set, especially because this is the first year that ASL is using Eureka. AGLA Middle School has used Eureka for a few years now. So the problem set is, it's a long set of problems for each lesson, and it is not meant for every child to do every problem every time. So when your child is assigned a problem set, for little ones, we suggest they spend 10 to 15 minutes on that problem set. For older students, up to 20 minutes on that problem set, but not beyond that. The way that the problem sets are designed is that the problems get more and more difficult. And at the very end of the problem set, some of those problems actually fall into the advanced range. So your child may be ready for that challenge of those most advanced problems at the end of the problem set. But if your child's not yet ready for that challenge, expecting them to do all of the problem set could be really frustrating and counterproductive. So if you have questions, talk to your child's math advisor. But again, the problem sets, spend an appropriate amount of time on them. And then lastly, I just want to say that math is really a language. And the language of math, the vocabulary that you use, is very, very important. And so when you watch the Eureka videos with your child, or you look at a parent tip sheet, or you're working on a problem set, notice the math vocabulary and help your child to hear that math vocabulary. So if terms like sum and difference and product and math language, that to actually, to use that language rather than just add and subtract. So in terms of growing in that capacity and helping your child too, that's a great way to support in math. And again, it goes back to the relationship and the SEL. If something is getting too frustrating, or you need a different strategy, then to reach out to your child's math advisor and help them to be successful. We've been able to support families throughout distance learning by really by personalizing. That's really what it is, by personalizing for families. Some families are comfortable with much more screen time. Some families are more comfortable with more paper and pencil. Some families have a lot of time to support their child with instruction, and some parents have very limited time to support their children with instruction. And what we want to do is help you and your family to be successful in distance learning, given the resources that you have, the challenges, the limitations, and the assets, and help you. And the way that we can do that, and your advisors can help you do that, is to personalize as much as possible. So again, I just wanted to share these strategies as ideas and guidelines, but not must-dos. These are just may-dos to help things go better when you are able to help your child in these content areas. And I'm glad to have been able to share them with you.
To end our video presentation, we wanted to give some friendly reminders. If you can, please remember to check your weekly emails from your advisors. They send a weekly update each week, and it has lots of good info in there. They give learning updates of what the prior week's learning was about, and what the coming week's learning will be about. And there are often links to other resources and PDFs for those families who can and who do prefer to print out some of the work. If you haven't done so already, signing up for Parent Square is highly recommended. We are starting to now move all of our school communication into that format, and we want you to stay as informed as possible. And then lastly, we've said this throughout our video presentation tonight, please do not hesitate to ask for help. We are here for you. And starting with your child's advisor really is the first and best start, because they know your child. They've, getting to know your child even more as the year progresses, and are really eager to collaborate with you, as Diane mentioned, to personalize in the ways that make sense for your families. So we want to thank everyone who was watching the video, and please know that we are here to answer any questions. So if you have questions and you are eager for further support, please do not hesitate to email me, Casey Rasmussen at aveson.org, as well as Diane at dianesimonson.org. Thank you very much.